Hello, everybody. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. I hope everybody did not listen to the arbitrary orders of governors and did their own thing with the freedom that they're entitled by our Constitution. So I'm gonna go ahead here with Federalist number 12. It's titled "The Utility of the Union in Respect to Revenue," written by Alexander Hamilton, written November 27th, 1787. Topics include the value of commerce and federal import tax rather than direct taxation on property. So in this one, this is a very, very heavy paper on taxation, the reason for tax methods of tariffs rather than a direct tax on property or an income tax. Income tax I don't even really, even mention, just because it's so hard at that time, because the government is not the same structure like everything is today with your, you have your online banking. Then a lot of people use ADP as their company that handles all their financials. It's nothing like it is today. So at that time, taxing income is like such a insane idea, because what are you gonna have, you're gonna have a government agent watching each person that makes every single dollar? So this is considered, to me, a more important paper, not as significant as a Federalist number 10, but it definitely is important for sure. Just knowing it's the importance of commercial prosperity in the Union and the need for Union to get that commercial prosperity. So Hamilton begins here by stating, and I quote, "The prosperity of commerce is now perceived and acknowledged by all enlightened statesmen to be the most useful as well as the most productive source of national wealth, and has accordingly become a primary object of their political cares," end quote. So here really what he's saying is, the idea of commerce will help us gain revenues for the federal government. It's our most productive source of that national revenue, and it is a important thing, because that's how you fund the military. Which, if you've noticed, the last 11, every single paper before this pretty much mentions the military in some sort of capacity. So Hamilton believed that the human propensity for avarice and enterprise served to vivify and invigorate the commercial realm of industry, which are the words he exactly uses. So pretty much the idea of human greed, an incentive-based system, a merit-based system, is something that would actually drive to invigorate the economy or the commercial realm of industry in America. Now, the idea, and this is actually what he states, the idea of the human nature of man receiving rewards for their toils will work to help flourish commerce, in turn raising the property value. Now, this is a very important principle. It's an important element of our current governing structure, capitalism, a free market, our current society that we live in. The reason that I'm able to sit here and pontificate from this microphone that I have here, as well as the camera that I'm staring into in the computer, and my TV right over there in the corner, and pretty much everything that you have in America, almost everything, you can blame the pricing, why you can get it at a somewhat affordable rate. The reason you even have any type of supplies or any of these products, you can really blame on the free market system. Now, I'm gonna compare this a little bit. Now, Hamilton perfectly is able to, and not only Hamilton but Madison as well, and Jay, they're able to diagnose the human condition, diagnose the fact that humans want, a commercial, or they want money, they want products, they want things, they like making money, they like having things, they enjoy, that incentive-based structure. Now, this is something that's very important in our society, and I believe they got it from, I think, a lot of philosophers at the time, deep thinkers, people that tried to understand the human condition and the human mind as well as they could, and recorded it and put it in history. Now, if you look at a communist system or a socialist system, this is the reason why it does not work. Because if you're told you're doing the exact same job as somebody else, and my job could be picking up garbage, and the other guy's job could be he's a doctor, and we're both going to get paid the same, then there is no incentive base to go to school for 8 years to become that doctor. You're not going to do that out of the goodness of your heart. There may be very few anomalies, very unusual cases where people may actually go to school for those 8 years because they actually truly do care about people. But at the end of the day, in the back of every human mind, you're thinking also about the money in which you're going to make to support yourself, and how is this going to help you for the future. Now, not everybody is thinking that way. I would like to think probably 90%, at least 90% of our population thinks that way. Every day I go to work, all I do is think about the money. I don't think about really, I do also want to do a good job because that could help me incentivize me to make more money. But I don't just go to work out of the goodness of my heart. It is not time that I put under my charity. I'm not doing it for free. I'm not doing charity hours. It is not, goodwill. The goodwill is me getting the paycheck at the end of the week. That's something that they account for in this free market system, this capitalist society that we live in, and this is something that's not accounted for in the Communist Manifesto or the socialist ideology, thinking that people are just going to continue to work when no matter what, the outcome is the same all the time. If you have a set outcome, what's the point in going out of your way and working above and beyond and doing anything extra? There is no point. It's almost like it's not the same, but it is similar in a way of a slave-like system where at the end of the day, no matter what, the outcome is the same. You will be getting the same paycheck. The paycheck for the slave was you got a place to live, you got something to eat, and you survived to live another day. And in the communist or the socialist system, it is very similar. You get a paycheck, you get enough to live the next day, but what would be the point of having an Elon Musk-like character that's going to go and create an electric car? And imagine him going and he builds that electric car, it gets taken by the government, they go and they give it out and distribute it to everybody, and there's no money that he is compensated at all for doing that, or he's compensated the exact same amount he would have been otherwise if he was a janitor at the nearby Chili's or something like that. So that's really what Hamilton and the other writers understood human avarice, human greed, and they tried to cover up that human greed and try to make it much more beneficial and try to bring the positives out of that human greed in creating this free market-based system. And that's something that is just not accounted for in communist and socialist regimes. And this is another thing that I want to touch on. The reason that these other countries even have cheap or somewhat affordable healthcare, the reason in which they can get prescription drugs or get these generic drugs and everyone makes a big deal, oh look, they got it for this price. The only reason that they can even do that to begin with is because America goes out and you spend the money to make these drugs. We're the ones that found the vaccine. No one else did. The American economy did. So you have a company like a Pfizer, let's say they come out with a diabetes drug, and that drug, to bring it to market, to do all the market research, it is an investment for them. So let's say they spend $100 million doing that. When they turn around and they go to sell it, they have to make that $100 million back. That's the reason in which they even invested the money to begin with. They got to break even, at least make $100 million back. Hopefully maybe they'll make $1 billion off of that huge investment in all these trials, right? So the reason in which these other countries can afford to just hand it out so cheap, they copy what we do, and they do not adhere to our patent laws. Countries like Canada, countries like Great Britain, they do not respect our patents. So we put patents out on these products, and then the patent lasts for only so long, and then you can come out with the generic. But the first couple of years, that we need to allow our companies like a Pfizer or a Moderna to make their money back off of the pill that they come out with. That is the only reason that these other countries even have any type of healthcare, is because of America, because of American innovation. If it weren't for America, we are actually paying for the healthcare all throughout the world, because our innovative free market-based system comes out with better products year after year. And that's something that does not happen. There is no innovation in these other countries. They're just copying our products. They're not following our patent laws, and they're taking that product, they're copying it, they're making a generic drug, and then all these other companies, it actually deters them from wanting to go out of the way and make a drug because they know it's just going to get stolen by another country that doesn't respect our patent laws. So if it weren't for America, these countries, forget it, they would not even have drugs to give their patients or their citizens. Now, that's something that's probably not known in the mainstream, because the mainstream media loves to, vilify our drug companies. Meanwhile, look who it is right now that's coming to help us. It is the drug companies that are coming out with the 95% effective and 90% effective vaccination. And they're always, people love to rip Big Pharma apart because the politicians they've subverted everybody, and they have circumvented people's belief system in thinking whoever has money is always the enemy at the end of the day, and they play into that idea of human avarice. They do the exact same thing, and they make people greedful, and they make them angry that other companies, that other people are successful and have money and have found a way to, build themselves up, instead of pointing at the politicians and being like, what have you guys been doing the last, so many years of my life? You guys are horrible. You haven't been doing anything for me, anything that's conducive to my lifestyle. So that is something that is everyone's vilified. Anyone that has money, oh, check out their tax records. They make a big deal of these tax records. If the guy pays $750, if a Jeff Bezos pays, let's say $1,000 in federal taxes and that's it, whose fault is that? That's not his fault. That is the government's fault. If you guys want this guy to be heavily taxed and you like to point it out and say, oh, look, he got away with paying no taxes, our government officials are doing the exact same thing. They're just not doing it at the exact same magnitude because they're not worth billions and billions of dollars. They like to turn and they like to project, because they're doing the exact same thing. They project it upon somebody else that's successful in making money, and then in doing so, they get these huge donations when they go to run, because when Joe Biden goes to run, he gets these huge donations because they know that he has the power to beat the ever-living hell out of our businesses and our free market. He will put as many regulations on Amazon as he wants to, regulations on business in general, just to shut them down. So that's why they're giving him money even to begin with. There's more power in the government saying no than there is saying yes. Yo, you want to build a bridge here? No, you're going to need this, you're going to need this, and then also I'm going to have to get a cut. I'm going to have to get a 10% of whatever you make off building that bridge. That's how dirty politics works. That's how dirty capitalism works. And if anybody's to really blame, I would definitely blame the politicians more for taking the money and doing the politically corrupt actions. Because if anything's illegal, the IRS will figure it out. The IRS will know. Now, if somebody only paid $750 in federal income tax, that's the government to blame, because the tax law, they've overburdened it and made it so complicated that there's certain ways in which you can subvert it and dodge it. And the politicians do the exact same thing. They just don't do it, like I said, at the same magnitude with the same amount of money. It'll only be, a couple million. It won't be billions. So Hamilton explains, and I quote, "It has been found in various countries that in proportion as commerce has flourished, land has risen in value," end quote. So that's just saying, as your commerce has done better and better, your land's risen in value. It's kind of similar to what goes on now. If you build your house, let's say your house has been there for 10 years, now suddenly they're building a city around your house. Now you're getting you're getting a train now right down the street from your house, a train station, so that will rise the value of your house or your land. And then he continues, and I quote, "The ability of a country to pay taxes must always be proportioned in a great degree to the quantity of money in circulation and to the celerity with which it circulates. Commerce contributing to both these objects must of necessity render the payment of taxes easier and facilitate the requisite supplies to the treasury," end quote. So he's pretty much just saying that, the taxation should always be proportioned in a way in which it's not going to stunt or curtail the way in which you bring in your revenue. So if you have a tax that's almost confiscatory, like a let's say all your groceries that you go, or only the fish that you go and buy at ShopRite down the street are going to be taxed at 70%, you're going to see everyone not buy fish anymore. They don't even care if the beef is an extra couple bucks, because at least they're going to make up for it and how low the taxes are on the beef. The beef is only going to be taxed at like a 7% rate, so why in the heck would you go and buy a bunch of fish if you know you're getting hit with a 70% tax? That's the exact same principle that he's applying here. It's that you can't overtax anything. It's like I said, whenever they decide to raise the taxes, the rich guys always find a way to dodge or subvert those taxes, and then in doing that, they will turn around and put in offshore accounts, or they will go and invest in different countries that have lower capital gains taxes than we do. When you go and you turn around, you put in for a capital gains tax or a unrealized gains tax like Ron Wyden wants to do, what's going to happen is all the rich guys that go and invest their money just won't invest their money. They'll just hold on to it, or they'll do whatever they can to make more money in another way. Whether it's opening a pizza joint and that tax is low, you can get away with doing that rather than taking that money and just throwing it in a company and then getting hit with like a 70% capital gains tax. Because then if you're getting hit with a huge capital gains tax, there really is no point in even investing your money, because it's just not worth the risk. And in doing that, it stagnates the economy. The economy just drops to the floor and just stays teetering at a low level. So once you lower the tax rates, just like they did recently, and that's why the stock market's up, and then everyone goes, oh, well, the stock market isn't a representation of the economy, which is garbage. The stock market is somewhat a representation of the economy. Now, on a small basis, it's not. Small businesses, no, it does not represent the small businesses. It actually represents the big corporations. But the big corporations doing well, there's people working for those big corporations that are regular, just working class people. So yes, if those big corporations are doing well in a way, then yeah, there are Americans also doing well. It doesn't work where you can't have one corporation or a bunch of corporations doing really, really well and then everyone's doing terrible. It does not work, because then those corporations make their money from other people spending money on their goods. So those people have to be doing well. If you're not doing well, then you're not spending money. I mean, it all works in congruence with each other. They're all related. So then he mentions the Emperor of Germany, or the Germanic, I think he calls him the Germanic Emperor, and at this time he was considered the King of Prussia, because Germany was weird the way it was. It was almost like certain parts of Russia or Czechoslovakia, those areas there were also still part of Germany at this time, and it was the German Emperor Frederick William II, and he was known for revitalizing Protestantism. He had a bunch of tax collectors that he overpaid for, and this is the point of it, that he had all these tax collectors that he overpaid to have there. And Hamilton mentions that the fertile land in Germany, the best gold and silver mines in Europe, but he was unable to bring in adequate revenues because of other obligations for those tax collectors, as well as the military. He had a standing military at that time. I read online it was something like 48,000 people, which I guess was a pretty big military to have at that time, and it was draining a huge amount of the revenue. And he was never able to really make up that money to pay for that military. And then also, I think he wanted even a stronger standing military. So I think he was borrowing money from other countries because he could not, and he was just pretty much in debt this whole time. And he would, they kicked him out. They brought somebody else in there, I guess, eventually. And but Hamilton stresses the importance of the proportionality as it relates to taxation. He warns of the ineffectiveness of a direct taxation, which I guess would be an income tax or just a poll tax they used to call back in the day, where you would just get taxed for pretty much living, for just being there, or a property tax, which he refers to in this paper as well. And he states, and I quote, "It is impracticable to raise any very considerable sums by direct taxation," end quote. So that's just him signifying that. Now, partially this opinion comes from experience in other wars fought with the resource of direct taxation proving to be inept in funding. They've tried to do this before. It just does not work. That was the Articles of Confederation. It stated something like, and we'll get to it in these probably I want to say in the 20s, like the Federalist 20 or something like that. He talks about the Congress. They used to call them the Congress Assembled. That was the name of the Congress, the government that was created through the Articles of Confederation, which I stated is just pretty much a legislature. The Congress Assembled had the right to tax enough to have a military. That's pretty much what it says. But there was no way in which it set up no apparatus for the tax collection. It just said they had the right to tax. So in doing that, the problem is it's such a broad statement that there's nothing specific about it. So it would have given the government the power at that time to have confiscatory tax rates and oppress certain people while not oppressing other people or oppressing certain markets. And then once they do that, they either drain the money or the people pull their money out of those markets, and then they have no source of revenue to collect. And that's what would end up happening, and it would not work. That's why it was considered inept in funding when you would direct taxation like that. Now he explains, and I quote, "In America, far the greatest part of the national revenue is derived from taxes of the indirect kind, from imposts and from excises, duties on imported articles from a large branch of this latter description," end quote. So he's talking about import taxes as well as export taxes, but more import taxes than anything. That was the best way to tax at this point, because like I said, it was very difficult to really get everyone. Like, you know, now you have your ID, you have your social security number. There's many ways that you could track an individual whether they're working or not. And that's why people get away. They don't get away with a lot of fraud cases, and there's special investigators that go in there and catch them. So at that time, it was very difficult to actually track Americans and tax them. So he believed in an import and an export tax, and he'll explain why. It's pretty obvious. It has to do with pretty much the eastern seaboard. But he continues, and he talks about farmers here, and I quote, "The pockets of the farmers, on the other hand, will reluctantly yield but scanty supplies in the unwelcome shape of impositions on their houses and lands, and personal property is too precarious and invisible a fund to be laid hold of in any way than by the imperceptible agency of taxes on consumption," end quote. Now, taxes on consumption is pretty much what he's saying is the best bet. If you're going to tax people on their property, especially a farmer, their property or their lands, he's saying they will dodge. They're going to go scanty supplies. They're going to make it like they don't have anything. So when you go to tax their house or whatever they have, they're going to act like they don't really have anything to be taxed. They're going to dodge it, as well as it's really not smart to have a direct taxation on your farmers, because they're really the ones that are supplying everybody with basic survival goods like food. So that was probably another reason not to do so. Now he continues, and I quote, "As far as it would contribute to rendering regulations for the collection of the duties more simple and efficacious, so far it must serve to answer the purposes of making the same rate of duties more productive and of putting it into the power of the government to increase the rate without prejudice to trade," end quote. Thus, instead of taxing the property or the income, which were difficult to assess at the time, like I said, Hamilton proposes a tax on imports. And he supports these taxes with the support from a federal government, meaning the collection process, the apparatus would be of a federal kind. He goes on to support this in future papers. He talks about how the apparatus will be of the state, or they will have certain state tax collectors, but they will report directly to the federal government. But then there will also be certain federal tax collectors in certain instances, like in, I guess, rivers or things that are considered much more federal land rather than state land. It is very, it's, the process in which things are done now are much more complicated than they were done then at that time. At that time, it's actually pretty simple. But now, if you want to go read the tax law, if you want to read any of these budgets they come out with, these blockbuster deals, and this is what politicians do purposely, they come out with these insane blockbuster deals that are hundreds of pages, so the regular citizen can't read it. And that's what they do. Like, for example, right now, the big thing is they can't pass any COVID relief because they're fighting apparently over, Republicans want to give certain protections for liability of an employer so they don't get sued for if somebody walks into their business, or if someone that's working there gets COVID-19, they cannot be sued by that worker for that. They're not liable. So they're working for that. Democrats aren't working for that. They don't want that right now. So, if you see online, the discourse online is you got one party that thinks that all corporations are just evil and terrible, horrible people, anyone that makes any type of money or, has a business. I don't even know how business owners do it nowadays, especially small business owners. It's almost like you don't even want to have to do it because constitutional issues you're not even supported on. You're being told who you have to hire, or else then it's racist. You can be sued if you run a bakery and you have a family business and you only hire family, and someone walks into your building and you tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I only hire family. They can then turn around and sue you on I think it's Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1965. They can just turn around and sue you saying that you're racist because you didn't want to hire them. And then you got to sit there. And it doesn't even matter at the end of the day if you win in court. The problem is a court like a New Jersey court or a Colorado court, because this has happened in Colorado. It's been recorded with a baker, this religious baker that didn't want to bake a wedding cake for a gay wedding. He didn't even, to begin with, he didn't even bake cakes for weddings. It wasn't his thing. And then he told them, no, I'm not going to do it. And then, they sued him for it because they're like, oh, well, he's homophobic. And then his response is like, well, I'm religious. That's, you protect under the First Amendment. The Colorado court told him to pretty much go screw. He had to take it all the way up to the Supreme Court. That's really where the issue starts and ends. Because when you take things, when the Colorado court or the New Jersey court does not support your decisions as an employer, then you have to pay more and more and more in legal fees. It becomes where they drain you out. So at the end of the day, you may win in court, but you don't really win. You have no money left, and then you're destitute, and your business goes out. That's what ends up happening. This is how this litigation. This is how all of this works. The frivolous lawsuits of America. All this. This is why having this hate speech, hate crime, all of this is what happens with super far left liberal policies. Is small businesses end up getting closed out because the government's trying to compel them and telling them with their property who they can hire, telling them who they have to serve, telling them what they have to make. At that point, it's not even your business anymore. You might as well just go out. What's the point? Go work for somebody else, I guess, or run a business that's so small you don't even have to worry about things like that. Because that's what ends up happening to a small business owner. The big businesses, they get out all day. They don't have to worry about it. They have the money to pay for the litigation. It's not an issue for a Walmart or or Costco or a business like that that's huge. I don't know any scenarios where it's happened, but I'm sure it has. But they don't get hurt by any of those policies. Those are far left, the quote-unquote woke policies that end up screwing the regular small business employer. So he continues, and he cites the states, instead of having that tax and property or income, you propose an impost on those imports, and he supports this with the federal government will be the apparatus for doing it. If the states were separate confederacies because of illicit trade between the rivers and ports, it would be feasible to evade the taxes. And the example of this that I'm going to give is if New York has an imposition because it's a separate confederacy and their import tax is a 20% tax, and New Jersey has a 10% tax, you would take everything through New Jersey and then you would cross over to New York property after that, because then you're dodging 10% taxes. That's the reason for having that federal government union that has a uniform rule in terms of the taxation of tariffs on imports. So I use tariffs and imposts interchangeably. They're generally the same thing. Now, Hamilton explains France and Great Britain as an example, citing that France has an army, and the army is for to enforce taxation, and it patrols around, I guess, certain ports and certain territory lines, and it stands at 20,000 troops, just running people down for tax money. Pretty much what's gonna happen. Just so ridiculous. Probably what happened over this Thanksgiving. It's so ridiculous. And then he explains, and I quote, the arbitrary and vexatious powers with which the patrols are necessarily armed would be intolerable in a free country, end quote. So pretty much he's saying, hey, listen, that's not going to happen here. I don't. To begin with, it's intolerable, and then on top of that, it's also stupid. Takes a huge hit on whatever revenue you're bringing in. It's exorbitant. I couldn't even imagine how astronomical that would be if we had some sort of standard like that today. Now, he proposes a few armed vessels. He proposes, and I quote, a few armed vessels judiciously stationed at the entrance of our ports might at a small expense be made useful sentinels of the laws, end quote. So this is really where he's getting to the taxation on the eastern seaboard, because at that time we did not have a Pacific Ocean border. We only had that eastern part of the country. So he's pretty much saying, hey, we're going to have our Navy, we'll have our tax collectors at the ports of entry. That's the only way that you're going to get into the country. There's really no other way to do it with goods, because if you look to the west, a lot of that land was inhabited by Indians, and they really were not, they weren't making textiles and sending them over. So we really only had to worry about the eastern seaboard. And then he states, with a powerful army and a system of uniformity as it relates to taxation, the Navy would only have to patrol its Atlantic border, thus facilitating collection of taxes, like I said before. Well, he explains that the transportation of goods between states can take one single night, whereas with Europe it can take a week. Thus, and I quote, it is therefore evident that one national government would be able at much less expense to extend the duties on imports beyond comparison further than would be practicable to the states separately or to any partial confederacies, end quote. So what he's really saying here is that because if you think about it, if you think about Europe, if you're coming with goods from Europe, it's going to take you, you're sailing the ship, let's say it takes you a whole week to get here, whereas interstate commerce going from New Jersey to New York takes you easily one day to hop over that border. So it would be, to extend those duties on imports it would be stupid to do it to have those duties not on imports and have them like between states. And it's another reason for why there shouldn't be separate confederacies, and it should kind of just be a uniform rule across the board. Now he continues, and I quote, I believe it may safely be asserted that these duties have not upon an average exceeded in any state 3%, end quote. So he's saying, this import tax has not been any more than 3% in any of these states that were bringing stuff in, because all these separate confederacies had their own different rules in terms of taxation on imports. So he calls for triple of this amount. He says it could be trebled. At that time, I guess that meant triple. And he cited France having 15% import tax, and Great Britain is having a 20% import tax. So he's pretty much saying, hey, America, we should be able to do at least 9%. We should be fine. We shouldn't have any issues. And then he explains, this part I thought was hilarious, and that's why I have it here. But then he explains alcohol as an example of revenue collection, and he states, and I quote, the single article of ardent spirits under federal regulation might be made to furnish a considerable revenue. Upon a ratio to the importation into this state, the whole quantity imported into the United States may be estimated at 4 millions of gallons, which at a shilling per gallon would produce 200,000 pounds. That article would well bear this rate of duty, and if it should tend to diminish the consumption of it, such an effect would be equally favorable to the agriculture, to the economy, to the morals, and to the health of the society, end quote. So pretty much here what he's saying is, hey, listen, we drink. This is great, because at the very end where he says, oh, it'll help our agriculture, it'll help our economy, it'll help the morals of our society and the health of our society if people stop drinking. So he's looking at this one as a total win across the board. He says, oh, let's tax the spirits, which are, the alcohol, and if people stop consuming, it's a good thing for it's almost like a deterrent, like, oh yeah, it's a good thing for us anyway. Like, Just at this point, 4 millions of gallons. I think he said something like there's 3 million people in America at this point. So he's estimating a 4 million gallons, I guess, are going to be drank. So I guess people really drank a lot at this time. They're drinking gallons and gallons of alcohol, which is hilarious. Like, nothing's changed in these last 250 years. Things have just gone exactly the same. As the population has increased with it, there's been a correlation of increase in how much we drink alcohol. And like I said, it's a take it or leave it. You know what? It's actually very similar if you look at the way in which he approaches it. It's very similar to what's going on in New Jersey. They actually just legalized marijuana through a vote because Governor Murphy didn't want to get any of his hack job legislatures or Democrats on to vote it through. About 2 years ago, he promised this when he was running for governor. He promised to legalize marijuana, and at the end of the day, guess who legalized marijuana? The people, not you. You did not do anything to help the cause. You tried to do it, and it didn't work. And what you did was you turned around, and instead of having your legislatures vote, and New Jersey's held by the Democrats all day, those are our politicians in this state. They have a heavy majority, no doubt. And instead of making them vote, he took it down because he said it wasn't going to get enough support. And then he put it on the ballot. Now, he did that because he didn't even want people on record what their vote was going to be, because he knew that his Democrat allies would look horrible if they voted no, and then they would lose their spot. So he put party above people in this exact scenario. They did not want to put it up for a vote because they knew that there was going to be Democrats that did not vote it through and didn't push it through. And then in them doing that, they would be voted out of office in turn, and he didn't want to lose any of his Democrat allies. So instead, what he did was he waited years to figure this out, threw it up on it as an initiative, and it went through overwhelmingly. I want to say the percentage was almost like 70% voted it through, but this is the real problem with the marijuana legalization in New Jersey in particular, not in other states, because I don't know exactly how their taxation is, but this is a huge money grab for Murphy. This is what he's going through for. He's talking about like he's thinking that they're going to make something like $300 million in revenue off taxation of marijuana in this state, and there's going to be a state tax on it, and then on top of that there's going to be a jurisdiction tax, like a local tax. So if anybody's ever gone to Atlantic City in New Jersey, Atlantic City has an actual tax, an AC tax, like an Atlantic City tax on top of the state sales tax. So that's exactly what will happen is if you live in, if you live in Newark or you live in Trenton or something, you want to buy your marijuana, you walk into the dispensary, you get your marijuana, it's a 6.625 sales tax, and that's regular New Jersey sales tax. And who even knows, the New Jersey sales tax on marijuana alone could be a totally different number than what the regular sales tax of consumption is on other products or other items. Now, on top of that, you're also going to pay whatever the jurisdiction wants to tax you. So he's looking at it for a way to dig the state out of a debt, and then the people kind of go and they turn around and they vote. Like, you'd much rather almost have a decriminalization of marijuana rather than a legalization of marijuana. Decriminalization meaning you cannot be locked up for it, you cannot be arrested for smoking marijuana on the street, because then at least you'll still have your same dealer or your same seller to sell you that weed, and you'll get it at an affordable price. Now they're going to jack it up because of the taxation on it. It's going to become like a tobacco tax. They're pretty much taking tobacco, because a lot of people aren't smoking it as many as were smoking it 30 years ago, and they're replacing it with marijuana instead. If anyone, I mean, there was a lot of people that I know that smoked marijuana, and they would tell me they were like, "Oh, I didn't vote yes for that." Like, I don't know. They're like, I have my dealer, I have my perfect price that I pay now. I'm not looking to pay any more than that. And I smoked in my house. I don't have any issues, But lefty policies, they trick everyone, and they project very often. That's another thing. They'll take what they're doing and they will turn around, just like I said with a taxation. They'll dodge taxes and they'll take advantage of the tax policy, and then they'll turn around. They speak out of one side of their mouth and they speak out of the other, saying, "Oh, look at that guy's taking advantage of the tax policy." And it's like, yeah, but if the IRS hasn't caught the guy, if he's doing everything completely legal, then what's the problem? Because you're doing the exact same thing on the side. So it's just a constant hypocrisy from our politicians straight across the board. Like the lady that's running in Georgia, that Loeffler lady, she's a Republican for Senate. You know, she, I'm pretty sure, is one of the Congress people that got caught for using information that she was getting from like some sort of Senate committee that she was in. It was a financial Senate committee, and she was using that for insider trading in the stock market. So when you know there's going to be a huge imposition or there's going to be huge regulation on a market like a let's say the tech market, for example, there's going to be a huge imposition. Let's say we're going to tax Apple's stuff that comes from China at a 50% rate now. That's what we're going to do. So you're going to see a substantial drop in the stock price of Apple as soon as that news comes out. It's going to be like that. It's going to be quick. So what they'll do is they'll short the market, and then they'll make money off of shorting the market. They will say, hey, I'm betting on this stock not doing well or this stock failing. So that's apparently she got caught for that. And there was there was Democrats and Republicans both got caught for it. And it's something that Nancy Pelosi does. Nancy Pelosi's made almost all of her wealth off of doing that because her husband is in the financial sector, and she was on so many different committees. And not only that, but the swamp all speaks to each other. So if she knows a senator that's in that financial committee, that senator is going to give her the information. Her husband rather is going to go and he's going to make those buys. So then he's going to know exactly what companies to buy and what companies to sell. And that's how she's made most of her money in Washington, I guarantee you, because she's worth something like $170 million, $180 million. I don't know what she's done other than working in government. At $170,000 a year, you're not going to make $170 million. It's just not happening. So he claims, Matt Hamilton, and I quote, "Revenue therefore must be had at all events. In this country, if the principal part be not drawn from commerce, it must fall with oppressive weight upon land," end quote. So he's actually, this is a part of the quote where he feared that if each state were tasked with collecting their own revenue, they would quickly switch to all avenues, and this is what I was explaining before, and they would become almost oppressive with their taxation, because if they know in certain certain sectors they can get away with taxing more, and in other sectors they know they're not going to make any money in this market, they know they can go into another market and really screw those people out of their money. And that's when it becomes authoritarian, tyrannical, all of that, when you get confiscatory tax rates. And then those are also enforced at the end of the gun, because the government, especially in today's world, at that time, years ago, the government wasn't a huge centralized structure, and they didn't have the same force that our government currently has. But really, our taxation is at the end of a gun. The government has a monopoly on force, on physical force. So their taxation is at the end of a gun. If you do not decide, you can get away with not paying the credit agencies. You can run a bill up with your Discover card at the end of the day, and then you can go and file for bankruptcy. If you decide not to pay the government their money, you will go to prison. You will go to prison for tax evasion, and they will make a huge deal out of it, unless if you are a celebrity. The celebrities get away with it. But if you're a regular person, if you're somebody that's not famous like that Lori Loughlin with everything that happened with her daughters, and if you're not one of those people, you will go to prison for a long time for tax evasion, especially if it's a lot of, like that guy Bernie Madoff. Look what he did. Everything he did, he wasn't known as like being this big top celeb. He was just like a regular dude, pretty much screwing people out of all their money. He's in prison until he dies. So he continues, Hamilton, and he states, and I quote, "Personal estate, as has been before remarked, from the difficulty in tracing it, cannot be subjected to large contributions by any other means than by taxes on consumption," end quote. So taxes on consumption also include like a sales tax. So he kind of equates taxes on consumption is kind of like sales tax, and then there's also the import tax, which is it would be today's tariffs. And we really ran our economy that way for a very long time. Like I said, I think they tried to do an income tax sometime in the 1800s. If you look up the charts, it's something like a 3% rate. It's very low, and then they get rid of it for a couple of years until 1914. I think it's the 16th Amendment when they start doing that again. They start with the income tax, and it was a low income tax to start, and then it just goes up and up and up, and now it's it's pretty high, and it's incremental, or it's progressive rather. The more and more money you make, the higher it goes. So Hamilton believed that these excises on a property would serve difficult to evaluate and saw it as a fast path toward economic oppression, thus his reasoning on a federal tariff tax on imports and consumption. So now he ends this paper, and I quote, "And as on the other hand the wants of the government can never obtain an adequate supply unless all sources of revenue are open to its demands, the finances of the community under such embarrassments cannot be put into a situation consistent with its respectability or its security. Thus we shall not even have the consolations of a full treasury to atone for the oppression of that valuable class of the citizens who are employed in the cultivation of the soil, but public and private distress will keep pace with each other in gloomy concert and unite in deploring the infatuation of those councils which led to disunion." So that's just him explaining if you do have a disunion, you don't have a union, then what's going to happen is you're going to have these states taxing people as much as they possibly can on all sources of revenue, and you won't have a full treasury because people are going to dodge the taxes, and it's going to be like a sad, pathetic spectacle, essentially. That's really, him just wrapping up the entire paper. And like I said, this was actually a pretty important paper because it was an introduction to taxation. But that's going to be it for this one. Today's Friday. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Just like, share, subscribe to the video if you like the content. Comment. I don't know what's going on with Rumble right now, but I'm getting like an outrageous amount. Like today I had something like 20 or 30 people subscribe all at once. I don't know what the heck's going on. I don't know if they're bots. I don't know if it's real, but I'm picking up steam on Rumble, but on YouTube I am stagnant. I'm not going anywhere. My one video, like I said, my current event videos end up doing a lot better than these videos because I think they are a little cumbersome. You got to think a little harder when you listen to them. They're not as they are informational. You learn from them. They're educational, but it's hard to talk about this to somebody that has never read the Federalist Papers. So you can't really use it in reality with political conversations with your friends or with your family like you can with a current event, a current event video, which I'm thinking of doing just try to get all of the different, it depends on how this week ends up going with the Trump team, with their legal woes, whatever they end up doing. I wanted to report on it, exactly what their litigation is. I mean, there's something like 30 cases at this point. A bunch of them have been rejected, but I want to at least get to a semblance where I can, list all of the different and go through, all of the different litigation cases that they've put forth. So maybe I'll do that over the weekend. I'm not really exactly sure. It depends on what kind of news comes out. But thank you for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you drop the mic on anyone you know. I greatly appreciate it. I will see you hopefully this weekend. If I don't see you this weekend, it will be Monday again. We're going to go through Federalist number 13. Thank you, and have a good weekend.